Welcome to Asia Society for a very special evening with Kishore Mahbubani. It's not the first time he's coming here. This is your, how many times, Kishore, have you been here?
On this
Stop
stage?
Counting. But he's
many times.
Many times, but it is certainly my first time sitting here on the same stage with Kishore, and I have to say I'm a little unnerved because he is such a wise, articulate thought leader. And so to be making this a useful hour for him and for you as a moderator and as a conversation partner is a very big challenge, I have to say. But I have taken this challenge because I think the book that he is going to share with us this evening is really worth a read for anybody who is interested in how our world is evolving, how the world as it evolving has very successfully worked on Singapore, a small country but a very successful country that now all politicians, geopoliticians, geoeconomists wants to get a piece of. And so I think under the current circumstances, as difficult as the challenges are, and as plentiful the promises and hopes of the future are, we could not ask for a better speaker to tell us about his story, very much enmeshed in the story of Singapore. So here we have Kishore Mahbubani. And by the way, if you haven't been here for a long time, I'm the new president of Asia Society, and I've been here for about 6 months now. Well, thank you. I read the book. I think many of us have, and then there will be a book signing after this conversation for those of you who also want to get your copy of the book. The book doesn't include any photos, and we thought that was very curious. So we got in touch with Kishore's office and managed to get some photographies of your very rich life of many phases. So Kishore, if I could just ask you, because it's not in the book, to look at these photos and give us a brief explanation of what that is, when that is, and who the people were. So here we go, the first shot.
Okay, first of all, Kyung-hwa, let me just begin by saying that it's truly a great honor for me that the new president of the Asia Society has chosen me to be the first person that she interviews as president of Asia Society. Yes. So this is a great honor. So if you don't mind, please join me in thanking Kyung-hwa for this. And this is an easy photograph to begin with because it's clearly my mother on my left, my father, my younger sister, and elder sister. And I must have been about 10 years old because I had another sister born when I was 11 years old. So since she's not in the picture. She's
not there yet.
I must have been 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And this was during probably a Deepavali. You know, the Indian Hindus celebrate Deepavali, the Festival of Lights.
Festival of Lights.
And this is clearly, you can see from the headgear where we are wearing, we probably were attending a Deepavali celebration.
Mm-hmm. I think we get Diwali celebrations.
It's interesting. The South Indians call it Deepavali, and Singapore is mostly South Indian, so they call it Deepavali, but the North Indians call it Diwali.
Okay.
This is probably the most significant turning point in my entire life. This is when I got the President's Scholarship in 1967. And the gentleman, the tall gentleman on the right, is the first president of Singapore, President Yusof Ishak. And there I was as I guess, 1967, 19-year-old receiving the President's Scholarship. And if this moment hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here today.
In your book, you said you had no idea how this came about.
Absolutely, I had no idea because the President's Scholarship is given to the top students in the country and you don't apply for it. The Public Service Commission, I guess, studies the results of the top students and then calls them for interviews and then decides to give some away.
And to this day, you don't know who spotted you and who, carried your name through that process still.
I wish I knew. I would. The one person I really need to thank is the person who nominated me for this.
Good.
This is my mother. And when I graduated from the National University of Singapore in 1971, and what makes this, I discussed this in my memoirs, what makes this photo interesting is that I did not actually attend the graduation ceremony because I had chickenpox. Because I didn't have chickenpox. So subsequently, I took the graduation gown and took a picture with me and my mother in a studio somewhere, rather than being at the graduation ceremony.
I have to say, looking at this photo and realizing how young and energetic your mother is, because when you read the book, you get this idea of a very, very hardworking, determined, and rather compared to this young son would be looking rather old, but in this photo you look like almost the same age. Maybe, maybe it's your beard.
Yes, I had many people read my book and seemed to like it, but one person who liked it a lot was Martin Wolf of the Financial Times. He's the chief economics commentator of the Financial Times, and I spoke to him about the book after he read it, and he said, Kishore, you know who's the real hero in the book? I said, who? He said, your mother.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's absolutely true. What I say, if my mother hadn't been as strong, as resilient as she was, because I describe in the book quite graphically the many challenges I faced as a child, because my father was an alcoholic, gambler, went to jail, got involved in fights, and so on and so forth. So it took a very strong, resilient woman like her to bring me to where I am today.
Well, she's done very well. And next?
Next, I think someone everyone in the room knows.
Yes.
President Ronald Reagan, and next to Ambassador Jean Kirkpatrick, who was then the U.S. ambassador to UN. And during the UN General Assemblies, the American president would host a reception for ambassadors, and that's how I got to give a picture of him. But this was in the innocent days when you didn't have all the levels of security that you have today. Today, to try and get near to a U.S. president is a near impossibility because he's surrounded by circles and circles of security. So this is unusual. It shows you things were much more relaxed in the 1980s.
Right. And in those days, it was not many heads of states came as they do these days. It's almost like a must-go place for presidents and prime ministers. Of course, you have them on top of the U.S. security. Their security makes it completely impossible to get around. But I do think that during the 80s, it was the UN ambassadors that represented their countries in these debates that opens up the and I'm not. Is that a good thing or a bad thing that the General Assembly is now an event at the highest levels?
Well, I think it is a good thing, I think, because I think the more I belong to an endangered species called a UN lover. I'm passionately in love with the UN. And I do believe that as we move into a small, interdependent global village, in any village, you need a village council. Otherwise, the village cannot function. So in a global village, we need a global village council. And the role and importance of the UN will grow over the next 20, 30 years, although it is going to have a rough time over the next 10, 20 years.
Very good. Okay.
This is a picture probably taken on my 70th birthday, when actually I did throw a reasonably big party for 200 over people, but then some of my friends traveled from overseas, or all my friends who traveled from overseas came to I think, not now home, I think it's somewhere else. And on my left is Jeffrey Sung. Those of you who will read chapter 1 of my book will realize that he's my oldest friend. I met him when I was 6 years old, so I've known him for 70 years. And then behind him is Dean Swift, an American who lives in Colorado. He makes a living by stealing tree seeds from squirrels, and he sells tree seeds. Mm-hmm. He makes a lot of money from it. And he was very generous to me and gave me $2,000 in 1969 to travel to Nepal and to India. Mm-hmm. And that's Jeffrey's wife, Pim, and then another old friend, Babir Singh, and on my right is my beloved wife, Anne.
Mm-hmm. And then she's sitting right there in the front row. Well, I won't ask you how your friend manages to steal seeds from squirrels, but you have many interesting friends, for sure.
This is Foreign Minister Wang Yi of China. He came to Singapore for a meeting, and then I had a discussion with him. This at the Shangri-La Hotel.
This was you when you were...
When I was the Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you remember what you were discussing?
No.
Probably the same issues.
All I can tell you is that he was very diplomatic.
Okay.
This is me with, of course, the most famous Singaporean, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. And on Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's right is someone that many people in New York know very well, Ambassador Tommy Koh. Mm-hmm. I succeeded him as ambassador to the UN. And he was ambassador to the UN altogether, 13 years, I think. 10
Before
plus 3.
you took over.
Before me, yes. Mm-hmm. And behind Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, you can only see the top half of his face, is Professor Wang Gangwu, a very famous Asian historian, who was chairman of the board of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Mm-hmm. So clearly I was welcoming Mr. Lee Kuan Yew to come to a celebration of the School of Public Policy named after Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is with a New Yorker, Henry Kissinger. This picture was probably taken in October 2022. Mm-hmm. I came to see him, and we had a wonderful one-on-one conversation lasting on over an hour, where he expressed to me his great concern about the way the Ukraine problem was being managed. You know, mm-hmm. He didn't think there was long-term strategic thinking in that problem. Mm-hmm. But for me, the most interesting part of this session with him, which took place at 5 p.m., was that when they brought in the drinks and the cakes, I said, no, you know, cakes are bad for your health. So I wasn't going to eat my cake, right? You know, I was going to be good, health-free. And then he, at the age then, I think 99, picked up his cake and started eating it. So I said, if a 99-year-old man can eat cake, I'm much younger, I can eat cake too. So I remember enjoying that cake.
Wow, wonderful photo.
By the way, Henry loved his cakes.
Well, and this is, I think, the final picture we have for you.
Yeah, this is a picture of a graduation ceremony at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. And I'm seated on my left is the former Prime Minister of Singapore, Mr. Goh Chok Tong, who was the chairman of the board of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy when I was dean. And on my right is President Wahid. He was president of the Maldives. And he was there as a visiting professor. We recruited him as a visiting professor. And in the front row are the faculty members. And then in the last 2 rows are the graduating students, a valedictory dinner of a graduating class. But you can see how diverse the student body is. You know, in the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore, we try to ensure that only 20% of the students are from Singapore, 20% from Southeast Asia, 20% from India, 20% from China, 20% from the rest of the world. So it is one of the most diverse classrooms of any school of public policy in the world.
And I'm sure each and every one of them have gone on to make their marks in their careers in their own countries. So thank you for that brief, I think, overview of your life in photos. But to start off the conversation, Kishore, what struck me most about the book was how brutally honest it was. Usually, memoirs are about events, about the issues that, as a public figure, you were involved in and how it evolved, and the personal side of things is mentioned incidentally. But your book is as brutal on the personal front as the public front. And I found that refreshing, but also very unique. And so is that just a unique temperament that you have, or did you intend it to be so brutally honest because it would make it more interesting?
I think that reflects my culturally confused personality. And actually, I'm quite serious. Because as you know, I'm ethnically Asian. And Asians are culturally programmed to be as discreet as possible. And Asians don't like to use the word I.
Yes.
They never speak about themselves,
Yes.
And they talk about the society. And by contrast, in Western culture, certainly especially in the United States, the individual is the most important. And each one is very open. I find that in my first encounters with Americans, I'd be very surprised where within 5 minutes they'd be telling me their whole life story and how they broke up with their partner last week and how painful it was. And I thought to myself, gosh, no one in Asia would ever be so open. So this is where you have two opposite cultural streaks. And so my book could have been a typical Asian book, which had been very discreet, very polite. But I decided to expose the Western side of my personality. And also because I thought at the end of the day, now that I've turned 75, I realized that I have lived through many layers of human history, right? I was born with a birth certificate that said British subject. Actually, I was more like a British object. In colonial rule, I as an Asian genuinely believed that the white men were superior. I was inferior. And you cannot explain that sense of cultural inferiority unless you're very blunt and direct about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's impolite to talk about it. But I wanted to share, especially with my children, obviously, for whom I also wanted to write these memoirs, to tell them this is exactly what happened in my life. So, and at the end of the day, I reached the end of my career. I don't aspire for anything else. So nothing I do is going to make a difference. So why not just state the truth and then let people decide what it's about? And at the end of the day, I also hope that by describing how much adversity I faced as a child and how much adversity my mother faced with you, so that you can overcome adversity. And I find, especially for young Singaporeans, they get a bit traumatized when they experience a bit of adversity. And I want to tell them, hang on a second, actually experiencing adversity is what makes you as a person much stronger. But you cannot explain that adversity if you sugarcoat it. So I've tried to give it directly, brutally, what exactly I experienced, as a child. Right from the picking up my father from a drain to living in a house without a flush toilet. All these details, I think, bring out a bit of color and smell.
No, it's therefore it really does make it more engrossing, much more impactful as a memoir. And I certainly think that it will have that effect on the younger generation growing up without any, that challenges in life that you had. Not to that extent, but I also had in growing up in a poor, war-destructed country, trying to get itself on its 2 feet again. South Korea, I think South Korea and Singapore share a similar trajectory of economic development and democratization.
偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹饪。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。